Ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds of the air, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, or let the fish of the sea inform you. In God's hand is the life of every creature, and the breath of all humanity.
For 6 years you should plant crops on your land and gather in its produce. But in the 7th year you should leave it alone and undistributed, so that the poor among you may eat. What they leave behind, the wild animals may eat. You should do the same with your vineyard and your olive trees.
Teach us your ways, O God, so we might live in harmony with all creation as you intended. I brought you into the land of plenty to enjoy its gifts and goodness, but you ruined my land. You disgraced my heritage.
The earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, for they have disobeyed instruction, swept aside law, and broken the ancient covenant. Therefore, a curse devours the earth. Its inhabitants suffer for their guilt.
Forgive us, O God, and teach us your ways once more. If you live according to my rules, keep my commandments and do them, I will give you rain at the proper time. The land will produce its yield, and the trees of the field will produce their fruit. Your threshing season will last until the grape harvest, and the grape harvest will last until planting time. You will eat your fill of food and live securely in your land.
Listen, O heavens, and I will speak. Hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching fall like rain, and my words descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants.
You made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all their starry hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You gave life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you. And so do we. Come to worship you and learn.
You, God, put gushing springs into dry riverbeds. They flow between the mountains, providing water for every animal. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. Overhead, the birds in the sky make their home, chirping loudly in the trees. From your lofty house, you water the mountains. The earth is filled full by the fruit of what you've done. You make grass grow for cattle. You make plants for human farming in order to get food from the ground, and wine, which cheers people's hearts, along with oil, which makes the face shine, and bread, which sustains the human heart. The Almighty's trees are well watered, the cedars of Lebanon, which God planted, where the birds make their nests, where the stork has a home in the cypresses. The high mountains belong to the mountain goats. The ridges are the refuge of badgers. God made the moon for the seasons, and the sun too, which knows when to set. You bring on the darkness, and it is night, when every forest animal prowls. The young lions roar for their prey, seeking their food from God. When the sun rises, they gather together and lie down in their dens. When people go off to work, they do their work until evening. God, you have done so many things. You have made them all so wisely. The earth is full of your creations. And then there's the sea, wide and deep, with its countless creatures, living things both small and large. There go the ships on it, the Leviathan, which you made, plays in it. All your creations wait for you to give them their food on time. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are completely full.
Then God said, I now give to you all the plants on the earth that yield seeds, and all the trees whose fruit produces its seeds and within it. These will be your food, to all wildlife, to all the birds in the sky, and to every crawling on the ground, to everything that breathes. I give all the green grasses for food. And that's what happened. God saw everything God had made. It was supremely good.
Do you have ostrich faith or eagle faith? Got to think about that for a minute. Well, let's talk about it. Ostriches are the world's largest bird, right? They are a flightless bird. They can't fly, but they can run at speeds up to 43 miles an hour, which is amazing. They have very strong, powerful legs, and these legs can also be formidable weapons. A kick from an ostrich could kill a human, or even a potential predator like a lion. Each of them also, they have two-toed claws on those long, powerful legs that could do a lot of damage. Just like us, we're strong, and there's all kinds of things we could do to defend ourselves or to do damage, but sometimes we are like the ostrich, and that saying that the ostrich sticks its head in the sand. Have you heard that before? Yeah. Well, they really don't do that, but the old saying probably originates from a defensive behavior of the birds. At the approach of trouble, ostriches will lie low and press their necks into the ground and their head in an attempt to become less visible, and their plumage tends to, the colors and the shapes blend with the sand and gives the appearance that they have actually buried their heads in the sand. But they just try to lay that long neck flat. Okay? But so here's the deal, is that you and I may not actually stick our heads in the sand either, but we may lie low with an attempt to not see what's going on or to become less visible, uninvolved, don't look at me for a solution kind of posture. So for the sake of the sermon today, for our purposes here, I'm going to just talk about sticking your head in the sand as a metaphor. Good? You're with me on that? Okay. This is kind of like plausible denial. Another way that you might think about it is that old image that might work for you is the old see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Yeah, it might work at. It's a I'm not involved. Okay? It's strategic ignorance at inconvenient truths. Just saying. We don't want to know. We don't want to change our actions. We don't want to be made conscious because then we'll have to change our actions or have a response. We don't believe we can make a difference. We don't believe we actually have a responsibility to be informed and take action. Isn't that somebody else's duty? Isn't that the government or somebody else? And so we would choose to lie low or stick our heads in the sand. Did you know that the ostrich also has the largest eye of any land animal? It does. Its eye measures almost 2 inches across. However, it's eagles who have the keen eyesight, right? Eagles, large, powerfully built birds of prey. Both of these birds so powerful and strong in their own ways. But eagles' eyes are especially powerful, and they have up to 3.6 times the human acuity, which enables them to spot potential prey between 1 to 2 miles away. Isn't that astounding? Such keen eyesight. They have extremely large pupils, which ensures minimal diffraction of the incoming light. That's the technical reason they can see. What matters to me is that they can see and see a long ways. So eagles have long been a symbol in Native American spirituality and all kinds of cultures. Eagles have been a symbol for keen eyesight and also a symbol then for leadership because they have long-range vision and they can see from those high levels. They see what's going on. So today we're asking if you have ostrich or eagle faith. Do you have your heads in the sand, I'm not involved kind of attitude? Don't look to me for a solution. God's going to take care of it. Or are you looking all around, seeing what's really going on, and taking that high-level leadership position to point out what's going on and have a theological view that you and God together will identify problems and find solutions? That's what I'm talking about. We've been talking about environmental theology or eco-theology for this month, for this series. So I'm talking about people who have their heads in the sand around climate change and say it's just not happening. Well, the climate's always changing. Well, that's true, but there's some extra things happening, and things happening at a faster speed today. People who have their heads in the sand about pollution through toxic waste and trash. We talked about trash a couple of weeks ago. Or the pesticide use on everything. Or our overconsumption of food, which has resulted in an over demand for things like beef and meats, which creates a distress on the land. Or the effects of much commercialized farming and on the animals themselves and resulting food products and GMOs and everything. Is your head in the sand in all this, or do you know what's going on? Are you seeing what's happening in the world around you? Do you have ostrich or eagle faith? Are you burying your head in the sand and waiting for the threat of climate change or environmental hazards to pass by you or pass along to another generation to solve? Or are you using your spiritual leadership, your respect for God and respect for the gifts that God has given you? Are you using your spiritual leadership and divine insight to be a good steward of the earth and spot both problems and solutions and participate? So this is a hard series. A couple people have said to me, this is a real hard series, Pastor, because you're asking us to really look at some stuff and get involved and apply our faith. Yes, I am. Because our faith doesn't mean anything if it's a Sunday-only deal, if it doesn't connect with all of earth. Yeah? Isn't that where the Bible began? With the creation, and God saw it was good. Is it still good? Reverend Dr. James Forbes Jr. wrote, a strange thing has happened on the way to infinite growth and productivity. We've learned that the soil that produces our crops and supplies raw materials for our giant factories will be depleted if mistreated. We also have discovered that industrial processes produced waste, which, when dumped into our rivers and streams, contaminates our water and soil. And when contaminants are spewed forth from smokestacks, the air becomes polluted. They foul the soil and the streams, kill the fish, pollute drinking water, and make people sick. Meanwhile, petroleum-based production and use releases more carbon into the air. Carbon dioxide traps heat and ultraviolet rays and in our atmosphere and causes the greenhouse effect. You've heard of that, right? Altered weather patterns contribute to an increase of violent storms. Have you seen those? Global warming, melting of the polar cap. We watched a Discovery video at the beginning of service about that. And the general rise of coastal waters lead to an increasing of debilitating conditions that are affecting the quality of life on our planet. Emissions of chlorofluorocarbons help to deplete the ozone layer and make us more vulnerable to ultraviolet rays. And shortages are beginning to develop in petrofuels and safe drinking water. See, it's not true that there's not enough water. There's not enough clean water. That's a problem. Poverty also induces an increase in the use of trees for fuel, and it adds to the problem of deforestation and desertification. I can never say that word. Desertification. That one, making deserts. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? And this all contributes to the destruction of species. So when we take the fuel, then it takes away the homeland of a species, and they move somewhere else, and it creates another imbalance. You with me? Are you aware of what's going on in our world? You've heard this stuff. This is not new, right? I'm scratching my head. If we've heard it, why aren't we paying attention? As people of faith, why aren't we paying attention? What are you doing? What will you do? How are you responding? What are you demanding of those who run for office? It's an election year. Are you asking them about their positions on environmental issues? We're getting into that cycle, right? Of everyone running for office. Are we asking those questions? Are we asking those questions of our local as well? The heavens are crying as we erode the ozone layer and invite irreversible destruction upon God's good creation. We're exhausting our natural resources and defiling the space that we share with our neighbors, animal and human. 20 years ago, there were 2,000 oyster fishermen in the Chesapeake Bay. But now, due to pollution and diminishing oyster beds, and also debated efforts to relocate and establish new oyster beds, there's only 500 oyster fishermen in the Chesapeake Bay. Loss of a resource, loss of a food, loss of income. We find plastic breaks down in the oceans into small confetti-like pieces. It's not like it really breaks down, but small confetti-like pieces that get confused as the light hits them. It gets confused with lanternfish, which are our primary food for tuna. And so what do we find when we catch tuna and cut them open? We find their bellies filled with little confetti-sized pieces of plastic. What we're doing to the earth has a chain effect, and it keeps coming back to us. Ellen Cohen Kiner calls us to begin to contemplate the life cycles of the objects we buy and use. Not just recycling, but pre-cycling. Where does our stuff come from? And where will it be going when I'm done with it? And if we have that kind of conscious thinking, we'll be more conscious of the environmental impact that our consumption has. And we'll wake up to our relationships with a whole host of environmental problems. And we'll begin to feel agitated about it. But the agitation is true and useful because this agitation is the call of the Spirit within, calling us to change our actions, to appreciate more and use less. The awareness is the power to begin to be agents of transformation. Is there an amen there? Oh, we're thinking about that. You have to sometimes get uncomfortable in order to be moved to that place of change. If we're really living in the image of God who created us, we would be good stewards of the power and resources we've been given. Is there an amen to that? We will recognize, which means to really see, and remember that having dominion over the earth, which we talked about last week, means treating the earth and its creatures in such a way that the land and the animals are able to sustain life. It's to manage it, not dominate it. If we truly want to understand ourselves in this world and in this time, we also have to question and understand our stuff. Ask ourselves, what is our stuff made of? Who makes our stuff and where? How do we get stuff? How do we choose the stuff we need? Where does our stuff go when we no longer want it? Does it just go away? You might check out the Stuff Project. Great videos. Great videos of the Stuff Project. But let me take it further and make it more personal for you. What about the stuff you eat? Are we aware of where it is made? Are we aware of what's going on with our food? When scientists alter genetic material, or DNA, it's called genetic modification, right? So we hear about GMOs. Genetically modifying foods or food crops can enhance taste and quality, can increase nutrients and improve resistance to pests. In some cases, GMO foods can appear to help conserve natural resources because the altered version might require less water or energy for processing. Did you know that the first genetically modified food to come to our tables was the Flavor Saver tomato? Some of you are old enough to remember that. The Flavor Saver tomato was grown in California. It received Food and Drug Administration approval in 1994. And after 2 years of testing and assessment, it was discontinued because the mounting costs made the crop unprofitable. Keyword, unprofitable. So it ceased in 1997. The creation of the Flavor Saver tomato and its distribution opened the doors for other GMO foods to be distributed and to find their ways into our kitchens and into our bodies. Now, you may be surprised I'm talking about this and I have a lot of statistics on stuff today in church. But when I hear that God gave us foods to eat and I see what we're doing to our food, I have to ask myself, where's my faith comment on that? Do you hear me? Rabbi Yossi Sarabiansky, I can't say his name, is a kosher supervisor. That means he's someone that looks to see that foods are kosher for Orthodox Jews, okay? He has great concerns that genes from non-kosher foods, such as pigs or insects, could be implanted in vegetables, and Jews may unwittingly break kosher laws by eating them. Traditional Jews are not allowed to interbreed species of animals or seed stock. And he asks the question, how does the Torah guide us on genetic alterations that can put flounder into a tomato? That's a spiritual question for an Orthodox Jew. Does that drive it home for you? In the U.S., genetic modification has expanded into almost every food and every area of food production. Scientists introduced some sort of modification into the genes of crops, dairy products, and animals. So for example, and I know you're aware of much of this, ranchers and dairy farmers normally feed cattle now a GMO diet, okay? Which is in turn then passed on to you when you drink milk or eat beef. So I'm asking the question, do you need to be concerned about what's on your family's dinner table? I want to ask another question. Why do we feel we need to improve on what God made? Isn't that a root spiritual question? In God's creation, cattle ate natural grasses. It's in Genesis, we read it. It's in Psalm 104, we read it today. But now, due to changes in farming techniques, our taste preferences have changed such that most Americans prefer feedlot beef to grass-fed beef. We have been coached and trained to like the product that's been altered. What's up with that? What's up with that? Why do we think we have to change what God made? Well, let's carry it through a little bit more. There's an increased demand for beef, too. We eat a higher percentage of meat in our diets than they did centuries ago. The increase for beef, of course, there's an increase then for cattle. And we could talk here in Texas about cattle moving around because of droughts and the loss of herds here and the prices. But I just want to talk about it in terms of the pasture lands, because the increase for beef, increase for cattle, creates an increase for pasture lands and for feed. The modern pasture management techniques have changed the natural grasslands biodiversity such that it causes faster soil depletion, increased soil erosion, and an imbalance between the soil and living organisms and decaying plant life. So the result of this is that soil carbon, which diminishes soil productivity, I got ahead of myself. The result is the release of soil carbons. And it diminishes soil productivity and exacerbates climate change. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is because we have changed the biodiversity, the land itself is giving off gas. It's giving off a form of carbon dioxide, the land itself. We have heard stories and jokes about cattle's damaging the ozone layer, and that it's the cattle's gas or the cattle's manure, and that the cattle themselves are releasing carbon dioxide and it's killing the ozone layer. Have you seen some of those jokes or heard some of that? You have. Really, the issue is the land itself. The land itself. The overgrazing and the stripping away of the natural biodiversity has increased the escape of carbon dioxide that was not able to move through photosynthesis with the plant life. Does that make sense to you? I mean, I know that's all like, when I was reading this, I was like, this is really complicated stuff. I was trying to get it as simple as I could understand it and to pass it on. But we have to understand that of all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide plays the most significant role in warming the earth. So what's happening with these pasture lands is important. Are you getting it? God created a balanced ecosystem, but we have altered that balance and keep altering it. We have forgotten our God-given ways. And when we change God's balance in the ecosystem, it has far-reaching effect. It affects climate, water, plant life, the food chain itself. And we have to understand that when we damage the earth, we damage ourselves. When we pollute the earth, we pollute our bodies. Yes? Between 70 to 80%, because it varies year to year, between 70 to 80% of the corn grown and 22% of the wheat produced in the U.S. every year is used for animal feed. While 30 million tons of U.S.-produced soy meal is annually consumed as livestock feed. The grain grown by intensive industrial farming, which use large amounts of pesticides and often rely on genetically engineered crops. Common genetic modifications include plants that are bred to contain insecticides within their genetic makeup, such as one that's called BT corn, or to withstand direct application of high amounts of herbicides, like glyphosate-resistant soybeans. In addition to destroying the natural biodiversity, when grain is grown with pesticides and then fed to cattle, to animals, the pesticide residues accumulate in the animal's fatty tissue and in their milk. And pesticides, such as those with arsenic compounds, are also included in livestock feed to control intestinal parasites and other pests. And what happens? Traces of these pesticides end up in our milk, yogurt, cheese, bacon, and beef. In 2013, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, studied urine samples from 135 preschool kids. I know that's a small test sampling, but hear this. 99% tested positive for chloropyrifos, and 64% for permethrins. A 2013 Canadian study found permethrins in 97% of urine samples of grade school children. More than any other pesticide group, permethrins have been linked to autism. Hello. The EPA classifies permethrins as likely to be carcinogenic to humans, but permethrin insecticides are used on many crops and are the most common active ingredient in indoor and outdoor insect sprays. Do we know what the city is spraying for West Nile mosquitoes? Do we know what we are breathing in? 93% of Americans tested by the CDC had metabolites of that chlorpyrifos that I can't say right, which is a neurotoxic insecticide in their urine. 93% of Americans tested by the CDC had that in their urine. Banned from home use because of its risk to children, this chlorpyrifos is still part of a family of pesticides that we're finding in our bodies, and studies have shown it to be linked to ADHD. 99% of Americans tested by the CDC tested positive for DDT degradants, even though DDT has not been allowed to be used in the United States since 1972. It's still being found in our bodies. And women who are exposed to DDT as young girls are 5 times more likely to develop breast cancer. The American Academy of Pediatrics recently called for more research between pesticides and children's ailments, especially birth defects, children's cancers, behavioral disorders, and asthma. It also advocates, the American Pediatric Association advocates feeding children organic food to lower pesticide exposure. That's one of the reasons, to lower pesticide exposure, asserting that young children whose brains are developing are especially and uniquely suspect to chemicals, vulnerable to chemicals. Do you know what's in your food? Scary stuff, isn't it? Scary stuff that we need to talk about. What's in your food? There's questions about labels, too. You see labels that says organic, but there's a lot of food now that's saying natural, right? And we jump to buy it. Is it? There's a lot of inconsistency on all the labeling, right? How about, do you know where your food comes from? And are the rules for labeling the same from Mexico, Canada, the US, China, Chile? All the places where we find produce in our stores here. Well, there's a link called whatsonmyfood.org, whatsonmyfood.org, that links pesticide food residue, particularly focusing on pesticides, with the data from the USDA with toxicological profiles for each chemical, and you can easily search them. I'll just give you a couple of examples. And again, it's hard to pronounce some of these for me, but azanafos methyl, a neurotoxic insecticide, was found on almost 2/3 of imported pears. 97% of domestic catfish were found to be contaminated with degradants of DDT. In other words, it's in our water system. 48 different pesticides were found on spinach. The EPA's Environmental Working Group compiles a yearly list of fruits and vegetables with the highest levels of pesticide residues. Isn't that just scary that that's what they have to do? Are you hearing that? The EPA compiles a yearly list of fruits and vegetables with the highest levels of pesticide residues based on USDA and FDA testing. The current top 12: apples, celery, sweet bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, nectarines, grapes, spinach, lettuce, cucumbers, blueberries, potatoes. Have you had any of those recently? So what can we do? This is some scary stuff. Washing fruits and vegetables can help remove some pesticide residues, yes, but only for certain pesticides. Others are resistant to the washing. Peeling fruits and vegetables is a more effective method of removing the residue. But then again, we've been taught that most of the nutrients are found just under the skin. And unfortunately, even that food washing or peeling is only part of the solution, because many pesticides are not only found on the outside, they have made their way inside through their root systems. For meat and dairy products, it's best to consume foods that contain less fat, therefore less pesticides, because they usually accumulate in the fatty tissue. To purchase skim milk or low-fat dairy products and remove the fat from cuts of meat before you cook them. The best way, they say, to really avoid pesticides is to eat organic produce, meat, and dairy products. True organic food is grown and processed without being treated with pesticides. Is there a yay? And we're told to look for the USDA certified organic label on our foods, but there's still inconsistencies with our own government on that kind of labeling. We can visit our own local farmers markets or local farms where you can ask the grower themselves what they have done with pest control. We've got to continue to ask questions of our government and of USDA certified organic labels to find out what it really does include or exclude. There also are some sustainable farms that are not certified as organic, but who don't use pesticides at all. So they may be local folks because the process to get certified organic is very expensive. So there are a lot of smaller, sustainable farms that you could buy food from. So you're gonna have to ask. You have to ask. This means we have to get our heads out of the sand and start to look and notice and ask questions and be more informed stewards of our shopping. Yes? Another thought, why not grow some of your own food? Some of you say, well, Pastor, that's what you do. But how about me? Or I don't have a lot of space. A 4x4 square, which you could make out of a pallet. Reuse. You could use just a pallet, even on the ground. But a 4x4 square, which is 16 square feet, can produce 30 to 60 pounds of food in 1 year. Don't have to have a lot of space at all. We can take some control back, right? And we can demand that our stores carry more local produce, more organic produce. We can participate with co-ops, food co-ops. We can make arrangements to get food from people that are growing. We can share in community gardens. There's a lot of ways in which we can take back some control of our food. Methodist Bishop Sally Dyke says that the system of food production relies on 2.4 million pounds of pesticides per year in the United States alone. And this figure does not take into account the chemicals added to the animal feeds, the steroids or antibiotics pumped into the animals, or the chemicals added to packaging in processing. The system of our food production uses 10 times more energy in forms of fossil fuel energy, primarily to produce the food, than it provides to the people eating it. In other words, it takes 10 units of fossil fuel energy to put 1 unit of food energy on the table. That's crazy. Much of what we eat is so modified and processed and packaged that it bears little or no resemblance to anything grown, raised, or caught in the natural world. We need to get back to what God created, yes? And these processed foods, as many of you know, cause harm to our bodies. A change in the production of our food would allow more ethical treatment of animals. That's a whole nother topic. Better environmental use of the planet and improved health conditions for the workers and consumers. Now, the problem is it would indirectly decrease efficiency and profit, which is the goals of industrialized food production. Our health is not the goal of the industry of food production. Do we understand that? As a nation and a world, we truly are able to produce enough food for everyone on this planet to eat a balanced and nutritious diet. The problem is the system that produces our food, along with the distribution system, the rules that govern the system and the money that pays for the system. There's not a food shortage. There's a distribution problem. Do we understand that for world hunger? What will you demand of your government, of yourself, of your local store? I'm asking you today, will you be an eagle leader, a spiritual leader, and ask for more organic food choices in your stores? And will you check labels and ask for more consistent labeling of natural foods? Will you enter into conversations with other people to raise consciousness? Will you check out where the stuff you eat comes from and how it's produced and what it contains and how it affects the planet and you? Here it is, a just society, a justice society doesn't encourage highly processed foods full of salt, fat, and sugar. A just society doesn't encourage those kinds of foods to be significantly less expensive than healthy food. There's something inherently sinful in the system we have allowed to develop. Do you hear me, church? When will we say no? Enough. In a just society, poor families are not forced to choose less healthy foods. So we want to invite you today to participate in just eating. Justice eating. Just eating. Right eating. Eating in such a way that we care for the earth, our bodies, and our neighbors. It's also about expecting that our food is grown in such a way that the earth can sustain life for all and not just for some, both now and in the future, both in the United States and around the world. Psalm 104 that we read said, "The earth is filled full by the fruit of what you, O God, have done. You make grass grow for the cattle." Hello. "You make plants for human farming in order to get food from the ground, and wine, which cheers people's hearts, along with oil, which makes the face shine, and bread, which sustains the human heart." Get back to our basics that God has provided. Genesis 1, we heard, God said, "I now give to you all the plants on the earth that yield seeds, and all the trees whose fruit produces seeds within it. These will be your food. To all the wildlife, to all the birds in the sky, to everything crawling on the ground, to everything that breathes, I give all the green grasses for food." And that's what happened. And God saw everything God made, and it was extremely good. What God gave us was good. Why are we trying to change it? Can we get back to basics? What God gave us was good. What does God see now? What do you see? So I ask you, will you have ostrich faith or eagle faith? Will you continue to lie low and hope that the problems pass you and try to just eat what's available to you and hope it doesn't harm you? Pray it doesn't harm you. As you're aware of the problems, will you act, or will you pass them on to another generation? Or will you be a spiritual leader? Will you have eagle vision and allow God to show you what's going on? Allow God to show you the high level view and to zoom in and see that problem at the distance. Will you be a leader in healing our land and healing our bodies and healing the body of the earth? Will you help cast a vision of justice eating, just eating, right eating, a vision of a just society with just treatment of animals and planet, just economy, justice for the biodiversity of the earth, and just treatment of our neighbors, foreign and domestic? Ostrich or eagle? Just eating. Amen.